there'll be another pop-up.
Okay, we're live.
How's it going, everybody? My name is Matthew Wenger, and we are here with Active Galactic Videos. I'm an education program manager here at Stewart Observatory at the University of Arizona, and I work with a group of students and former students who are from a variety of disciplines. Today, we are going to be talking about our latest 2 videos, which hopefully you've had a chance to see, and if not, you should definitely go take a look as soon as we are done with our live session. So the first one is about messages to and from extraterrestrials. So the Arecibo message that was sent out by humanity, and also the WOW signal, which is kind of a weird detection that happened around the same time. And so we made a video about that. And then also we made a second video that was about decoding the Arecibo message that we sent in 1974. So I'm going to introduce the rest of my colleagues here. I'm going to start with Martine. And so actually Martine is new to our group. So some of you have probably not met Martine. So why don't you just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Martin Somoza, and like Matthew just said, I am new here, and I am a videographer for everything that's been happening around here. I was responsible for the Decoding video that was just put out yesterday, and I am currently a film and television student at the University of Arizona. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you, Martine. And then Victoria, hopefully you will all recognize. Hi, Vicky's mom.
It's her birthday today. Happy
Is
birthday.
it really?
Yeah.
My birthday was yesterday. We're birthday buddies.
Also, leave a comment in the chat. Wish Matthew a happy birthday. And my mom. Anyway, I'm Victoria. I'm a videographer here at AGV. I did my film and television degree here at the U of A, and I stuck around for a little while, and I make videos for the team. So for these couple videos, I helped Martine film the Decoding video, and then I also got to film and edit the first Arecibo video about the sending messages to and from. So yeah.
Excellent. And then we also have Michael Hardegree-Ullman, who is on with us virtually through Skype, and I'm going to let him introduce him.
Hello, I'm Michael. I'm an astronomy and physics student here at the U of A, and I helped Vicky make the first Arecibo message, and I helped edit it a little, and then I helped out the whole team making the decoding video for yesterday.
Recognize him. He also was the host of the Arecibo, the original Arecibo and WOW signal video. Yeah, and he kind of ran the video for the second one. So it's the 4 of us today, and we're going to talk about the making of these videos. If you have, as usual, any questions for us about the videos, primarily we want this to be a resource for people who are interested in science and science communication. We are a university, we are students, we are learning, we're trying to figure out how to make better science education and communication videos. We don't know everything, but we are trying to learn, and so we're trying to share our experiences with learning how to create videos, but when we also have questions for the community about what we can do better, and we'll talk about our thumbnails at the end. We've tried to do some different things this time, and we got those suggestions from people who were on with us during the live sessions and who communicated with us through our comments on our videos. So the first thing I want to talk about with Victoria and Michael is, where did the idea for the original video, the talking to aliens video, come from?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll talk a little bit first, then we'll throw it
head
over
over
to
to
Michael. But yeah, so in the beginning of this semester, back in January, we were all trying to figure out different ideas for videos and things that we wanted to do throughout the year. And so I was doing all my YouTubing, searching through all my archive stuff of liked videos that from SciShow or Veritasium, stuff like that. And I was reminded of this thing called WOW signal, which is covered in our Arecibo video, and that led me down the little rabbit hole of messages, strange transmissions we've gotten from space, and then messages we've sent out. Because I've always thought it was really interesting that, like, not only have we sent out the Arecibo message, but, like, on both of the Voyager missions, they have the, like, gold discs, right? With all the, like, you know, the gold records.
And the plaques, yeah.
Yeah, and the plaques. And I've just always thought that's so interesting, like, that we send these things out to the stars and, like, as, like, a just in case, you know, we throw on a little message. And so it got me really interested into the Arecibo message and this whole idea of, like, we beamed out this radio signal, you know, and it was going to take, what, like 25,000 light years to even get it to anything or something wild like that. Oh, yeah, 25,000 years. And, like, you know, we had to try to format it for, like, as if, you know, a life form that is not familiar with any of our language, any of our, like, customs, any of our anything, to read it. And I thought that was so interesting because, like, there's already so much of a problem just, like, interpreting languages that have been created, like, on Earth by, like, civilizations that aren't around anymore to tell us what things mean. You know what I mean? Like, we still trying to figure out what, like, hieroglyphics mean and stuff. And it's like, how do we even go about communicating with a life form that's on a different planet, that might be on a different planet, when we can't even understand everything from our own past, you know? And I just, like, it's just so interesting to me, so I threw it out as an idea, and Michael seemed to really like it, so we expanded upon that.
So, Michael, why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with this and why you wanted to make this video?
Well, you talked about it earlier about Voyager's golden records and the golden plaques, and I've read a lot about that, especially recently. There was a Kickstarter to sell a new golden record. But even though I'd heard of the Arecibo message, I knew almost nothing about it. And so that seemed to be the perfect thing to make a video about. It's something that's very interesting and relates to something that people might be more familiar with, but that people might not have heard of before. And going beyond that, the way that the Arecibo message is often depicted is in colorized blocks showing the different sections of the message. And some of the videos we've made in the past dealt with doing stop motion, paper, animation, and I love that format. And I thought that the Arecibo message worked perfectly with that because we could show the message with just paper, and I thought it was a great visualization to show what the message said.
Yeah, so that was the impetus behind the video, and so then I think this is a good time to talk about the impetus, kind of the motivation behind the second video too. So as we were getting ready to release the video, the original video, I started asking questions mostly to Michael, I think, at that point, and that was another rabbit hole that we went down. And so Michael, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we discovered about the sending of the Arecibo message while you were doing that research? So, for example, why they decided to send it where they sent it and how they constructed the message?
Yeah, so when we were originally going through, we were just sitting in the office talking about what the different message meant when we were talking about the first video we were making. And then just a lot of questions kept popping up, such as, why did they send the message? And when we were looking it up further, it took us a while, but it turns out that the reason they sent it to, I think it was M13, is because it was just happened to be overhead when they wanted to do the ceremony to send the signal. And that just really spoke to why they made a lot of the decisions about the message, is that the message was just a publicity stunt. That was the point of it. It wasn't really to be deciphered by aliens. And when we started trying to decipher it ourselves, just sitting there looking at it for a while, because when we'd gone through originally, we just sort of knew what the different pieces meant. We didn't actually try and see why they meant that. So we knew that something was the number 1 or the number 2, 3, 4, 5, but we didn't actually know how it meant that. And when we were just sitting there trying to figure it out, it took us forever, but we finally were able to figure out just the numbers 1 through 10, but then we couldn't figure out half of the rest of the message. And just in going through all of this, it kept just popping up question after question that we couldn't really answer. And then I think you were sitting there and you just said, stop everything you're doing right now trying to decode the message. We should make this a video, because it was just really interesting sitting there trying to decode the message, even when we already knew what it meant. We knew what all the numbers were. We knew what all the symbols were supposed to represent. And it was still really hard for us to try and figure out what it meant. And so we thought it'd be fun to try and bring in a few other people who had no idea what the message was to try and figure it out.
I thought it would be pretty amusing to try and sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback, and I'm
but you can switch it back.
Trying to figure
Okay.
out. So anyway, so I thought it would be really interesting to try and get other people to get as frustrated as we were getting trying to analyze the message, because it was just funny. It was a funny process because I kept wanting to pull my hair out, because I was like, we should be able to figure this out, right? We already know what the answers are. So how is it that we can't figure out how this represents 1 and how this represents 10, and how can we not understand this? And so, I mean, it took us several hours to even get through the first 2, and then by that time I realized that we should be making a video about that process. So back to the first video, let's talk a little bit about the process of filming and cutting it. So it was actually a really straightforward video, right? So who wrote the script for that one? Was it Michael, or was it you, Victoria?
Well, Michael wrote the script. We kind of like had a meeting, me, him, and our other one of our other video producers, Grant, who helped out and everything. I think Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure you and Grant kind of collaborated on the script after we discussed like how we wanted to shoot it, because we had a little meeting about like, oh, let's use stop motion, and like how are we gonna, like, is the whole thing gonna be stop motion, or are we incorporating it in with other stuff? And so we kind of figured out the framework, and they took it and ran with it because they knew more about the science behind it. And Grant's a great writer, so he's able to kind of frame it in a nice way. Grant was also the one who was in the reenactment of the WoW signal.
Right.
So, yeah.
And those are just they're 2 interesting events that are they're not related to each other, except that they are about kind of this attempt to listen to or send messages to civilizations outside of Earth. And there's a whole SETI Institute now. And there's a whole complicated story behind SETI and how it was funded for a while, and then it lost funding, and but now it's a thing again, but they have private funding, so they aren't entirely dependent on government funding, which kind of goes at the whims of the public. And so it's still many scientists consider it still, even if it's a long shot, it's such an important long shot that if we were to detect a signal, that it would change everything. And so, it's this kind of, we don't want to spend all of our funds on it, but we don't want to not look, because the technology that we have behind observations is getting better and better and better all the time. And we're now able to use radio telescopes to do multi-channel observations. So anyway, the history behind SETI is very interesting as well. And so I'll let Michael talk a little bit about the stop motion real quickly. Again, that's kind of a style that we adopted and fell into. It's easy for us to produce, both with the technology that we have and with the time that we have available and the expertise that we have available. And so that's, I agree with Michael that this fit very well for that. So Michael, I'll give you a minute to just kind of give your take on that.
Yeah, so when we were trying to figure out how exactly we wanted to put this video together, as Vicky was talking about when I was writing the script, hard, because on the one hand, it was really easy to fall down the rabbit hole and just go on and on about what the message meant and how to decode it, which is why we ended up making a second video. But on the other hand, the stop motion works really well to just sort of quickly get across a point and show it really visually well. And so we wanted to just sort of briefly run over everything. And then I think Vicky's the one who actually made the stop motion. None of us were really involved when she was making that, but it went section by section. And so one section would go down with a different color, and we'd spend a little bit talking about that. But when we had finished everything, I still think it's a great way to just briefly go over the Arecibo message. It just didn't end up going deep enough, because we had still a lot of questions, even following that we thought people would find interesting, because it's a fascinating message.
So again, the first video was a real straightforward one to produce, and so I don't think we had any major pitfalls or anything. I mean, I think the one thing I think that we weren't sure about was whether we wanted to shoot it in front of a screen or or outside walking. So we just kind of went with that that first person kind of narration style. And but again, it was pretty straightforward. We wrote a script, filmed the animations. Now, did you guys animate any of those in software, or was it all done stop motion with individual frames?
Everything was done stop motion. I kind of just set it up in my house and did the thing. Took a while, but you have some music on in the background. And the only thing I really did digitally to change them. I mean, we added the text obviously digitally. Michael did that, but for timing things, there were some that I would hold in a frame if it was the end of this part of the message, so I'd extend certain ones instead of having it run all the way through, or there's one section where my board just wasn't big enough. So I had to film it in 2 separate chunks, and then I essentially put it together and shrunk it a little bit. But that was really it. And I mean the part where we have the radio telescope and it's beaming out the message, we have the little things. I only shot that once and I repeated it 6 times. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
Just little stuff like that, but everything essentially was stop motion. It's fun. I like stop motion.
That's cool. And then the other thing is we do a little bit. I mean, we have done full stop motion with individual frames, but then the other thing about stop motion is it's nice is you can grab it in software and you can move the things around and edit it, and it doesn't really make it look worse, right? So I mean, it's got a lot of flexibility, and it's cute. We've got some cute artistic elements that we can add, and I think that's really fun. So the next thing that we'll talk about is the second video that went out just when did it go out? Just yesterday. So it just went out yesterday, and we already have 140 some views, so thank you to those of you who have watched it. And that was a ton of fun to make, and that was an interesting process. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that video, because I would say there were definitely more challenges and more just more things that we had to figure out with that video. And as Michael and I have talked about, the idea behind it came from our own questions about the message. We talked about the message, and I was like, I really think that our audience might enjoy a deep dive into one of these topics. Now, the wow signal is very interesting and mysterious, but there's really not much else about it. We don't know anything about it, and so it's a mystery. And so trying to dive deeper into that, I mean, we could talk about specifically about where it was pointing and the specific technology that was used and ways that we could look for signals now, but it's never been rediscovered. I mean, it's likely that it was some kind of spurious transmission, though at the time, again, there were not a lot of satellites in orbit, and they sort of tried to narrow down which satellites there were in the sky at the time, and and nobody's ever had a really satisfactory answer. But it was also this one-off detection, so there's not really much that you can do to follow up on it. I mean, all we can do is keep looking and keep hoping, but it's not worth our time to always point a telescope at that signal and hope that we get something else. But I think the Arecibo message there's a lot of room for exploration there. And what I thought was funny was the idea that it's hard for the species that sent the message to decode its own message. So how funny is that, and how funny would it be if we received a message like this from an extraterrestrial civilization? We'd have no idea how to decode this. I mean, some of the we were talking about how funny it would be, some of the funny thoughts, if we received a message like this on Earth, there would be hundreds of dissertations. I think there would be entire journals about each section of the message. I think each glyph would have its own journal. It would be the alien message glyph 2 journal, and like,
and then of course, like, even, you know, if you've watched the Arecibo Decoding, one of the parts that they had to figure out was like which way was the message oriented once they figured out the prime number thing. Like, there would even, I bet you there would even be like a bunch of journals that were like, everyone's got it wrong, it's this way, and this is what it means.
Right,
like,
the horizontal orientation journal, the journal of the horizontal orientation, the journal
like
of the vertical orientation. Like, it would be chaos. And so we just thought that was the idea that we had so much trouble decoding it, that giving it to some people who had never seen it before could be amusing. And so we went about putting this together, and frankly, it was challenging. So we pulled back Melissa, who was a former member. She graduated at the end of last semester. So we pulled her back into the fold as our expert on planetary science. And so astronomy and geology are her two areas of expertise. And she's currently doing a research project in planetary science at the Lunar Planetary Lab. And then Alexander Danahy is a software developer that works with our team. And then Aiden, again, we pulled him back. He just, excuse me, my throat is getting clogged up. So he graduated, and he has been doing research, and he has a graduate student position at UCLA that he's going to be starting in the fall. And then we had to find somebody who was in biology, and so that was an ordeal. So I contacted some friends that I have in molecular and cellular biology, and they recommended Elias. And Elias is fantastic too. He's a race car driver. And I mean, when he introduced himself, we were like, what do you do? And he's like, well, I'm a race car driver, but I also study
I used to do biology.
molecular and cellular biology.
It's like,
which was fantastic.
That's like the kind of thing on the level of like, what's his name, Brian May.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm the guitarist of Queen, but I also kind of have like a PhD in astrophysics. It's no big deal. Like,
whatever.
Okay, sorry.
So Elias was fantastic, and so that was a lot of fun. So so Michael and I talked a lot beforehand about how we were going to organize this, and so Michael, can you just briefly talk about some of the things that we thought about and how we organized the get together and what we decided we wanted them to do and how we thought about that ahead of time?
Yeah, so when we were thinking about, we really wanted to think about how we wanted to make the video. And so while we wanted them to be decoding the message as the primary part of the video, we also wanted some sort of intro where they would discuss their own ideas. And so when you watch the video, you can see that we ask them things like what they would send or where they would send it, just to try and get their unbiased ideas before they actually get into the message. But other than that, we really wanted it to be run by them to see what they could figure out. Unfortunately, you only saw about 25 or 28 minutes, something like that. We were there for something like 3 hours, and we still could have been there for weeks if we hadn't given them help. And so we had to make sure we had things prepared to give them as hints to help push them along, because it really is nearly impossible to decode without some sort of help. And we're humans, we're the ones who made the message. And so we had to really think about how we wanted to help them. And then there are a few other things like the depiction of a human, which obviously they would get, but some alien might not. And we were trying to figure out how we wanted to run the message forward, how we wanted to show it to them. And what's interesting is my favorite part of decoding the message was handing them the list of ones and zeros, which was not in a format, which wasn't in anything, because really that's what the Arecibo message was. It was a frequency that was oscillated slightly to make ones and zeros. But they weren't given the blocks that everyone's always shown. They weren't given the colored blocks to show which section of the message is which. And so showing them, giving them that, and then just trying to see what they would make of a list of ones and zeros, which is all the aliens would presumably have to start with. We wanted to give them it from the very beginning and then eventually push them along until they have a visual representation of the message to decode. And then we also wanted to figure out how exactly we would tell them they were right. And so we ended up settling on making those little note cards that we placed in front of them showing what each section was as we went along. And then finally, the debrief of the message is something that we only came up with while we were sitting there. Is we decided as the video was being made, Matthew and I were talking in the back, that we wanted to get everyone's thoughts afterwards, especially once they all seemed so frustrated with trying to figure it out. We wanted to see what their overall thoughts were when they weren't actively trying to decode everything. But it was a fun video to make, and the full 3 hours was hilarious, and unfortunately we did have to cut that back to sub 30 minutes.
Thank you. So we also want to talk about the process of making and then ultimately editing the video. While we were making the video, as Michael said, we spent 3 hours there, and I'm going to hand it over to Martine, who's going to talk about some of the decisions that they made. So Martine and Victoria were in charge of setting up the video. So if the two of you can talk a little bit about some of the decisions you made about how to film things, and then some of the snafus that came up. And I will say that one of the reasons we chose to shoot it the way we did and to make this kind of video is because it was something that we thought that we could handle. Because trying to get make some of our other videos are a big production, trying to get locations and write scripts, and those are potentially months in the making, whereas we thought that this was a video that we could film quickly, that we could edit and get out the door within a week or a week and a half. I think it ended up being. So I'll start with Martine, and then you two can basically just kind of go back and forth and talk about some of the decisions that were made, and then once you're done with the filming, then we'll talk about editing.
Yeah. So the filming was, as we thought it was going to be very straightforward. We had, of course, the main camera that you see throughout the majority of the video. Then we actually had a overhead camera that didn't end up working at the end of the day. It ended up shooting about 20 minutes of footage, and that footage was the beginning where there was nothing on the table. So that footage was rendered useless, but luckily I was running around, as you saw in the video, capturing moments of them pointing at things on the table, their reactions, things that they said, and that led to a challenge itself as well. There was times where something was said on the opposite side of the table, or I guess I should say I was on that side of the table and I had to run back to try to catch what I could of what they said or a reaction that they had. So that was very difficult, and it was also very difficult to film with limited batteries. We ended up crashing with batteries at some point, and it all dwindled down to the main camera. And yeah, I think that was one of the issues, one of the biggest issues that we had was not being prepared to be filming for 3 hours long. So yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest obstacles. Because
our original plan was we figured, this will take about an hour, and so we have enough batteries. We filmed for an entire day before, but we didn't think that it was going to take that long, and so I think we weren't as prepared as we could have been.
We were also using two cameras. We were using
that's right. We were eating through batteries quickly because we had 3 cameras,
and they all take different batteries.
Yeah.
So Martine only had one battery. My camera only had one battery. It's when we're out, we're out. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So did you have anything else to add? So as Martine mentioned, we had an overhead camera that was supposed to just give us some variation in shots. And as I was thinking about this video, we wanted to explain the Arecibo message and give people a chance to kind of dive deeper into what the message meant and how to read the message. But it was also a video about the people who were trying to solve it. We were trying to show, it was supposed to be a funny, emotional video about kind of the process of these people going through and trying to figure this out. And so we wanted to have lots of close-up shots and get pictures of people reacting to things. In some sense, it was like a reaction video to what people do and say when they're confronted with this message and frankly with some of the answers. And you saw the frustration that ended up coming out in really funny ways. And it's great. And if you haven't watched the whole video, the whole thing is, I think, worth watching, but it gets funnier as it goes on because they genuinely start out trying to solve the puzzle, but by the halfway point they are so frustrated with with the message that it really starts to get funny, and they start just like losing it and like, you know,
I mean, yeah, I think
face palming.
I think my favorite part, and I don't think this even made it into the final cut, was when they first were like, they got the like prime number and they're like, oh, so it needs to be a grid, you know, and Michael presents them with the two, like the horizontal and the vertical. And they're like, oh, like, someone's like, it's clearly this one. Because, like, you can tell. If you look at the vertical one, it looks like something. Like, it looks like a message. The horizontal is just a mess. And then one of them's like, well, no, wait, let's, you know, and they, like, actually try to reason out why it would be the horizontal one. Yeah. And then, you know, you're like, we're 3 hours in, and at the end they're just pointing to things being like, satellite? Yeah. Bird? Like, what is it?
Amoebas.
The turn. It was so good.
Absolutely. Oh, it was fantastic.
This is the diameter of the dish. You got it.
So does anybody have any, so that was a good moment. Does anybody else have any moments during filming that they thought were particularly interesting or funny?
Yeah, one of my favorite shots was when Alexander just dropped his pencil because he was trying really hard to get a message across with my count that I was running around with, and he lifted a paper and his pencil just falls down and he acknowledges it, and it's actually in the video as well. Yeah, very funny moment.
Yeah, and I like some of the reactions, like Aiden's, like his are more subtle, but he's just got these eye rolls and like his leg going crazy. Like, oh, it was great. So I don't know, Michael, did you have any funny moments that you wanted to mention?
What was really funny is that there were definitely a few times when they thought that what they had gotten right already was wrong. Alexander at one point says, oh, I'm so stupid, like I'm a programmer, I started counting at 1 or something. When the message did start counting at 1, he had gotten it right, but he thought, oh no, I'm so stupid because I started doing it the right way. And there were a lot of times like that where people started to go down the right path, like when we were talking about DNA, and then they were like, oh no, that doesn't make any sense, that's stupid. And that all came together when Aiden said, I think that if you were an alien and you depicted this completely correctly, you would look like an idiot. People wouldn't think that you had any idea what you were talking about. And it's true. And that really showed when during the decoding of the message, the people, even when they got it right, were convinced they were wrong at various points. So I just found that really interesting.
So the last thing that I want to mention, or give some time to, because we're actually out of time, but I want to give a few minutes to the process of editing this video, because we started. How do you? And I have, these are legitimate questions that I have. How do you go from 3 hours of footage to a 28-minute video?
Yeah, it was difficult. As stated, it was 3 hours of footage, and there's so much that happens within those 3 hours, and there's so many good moments, and it's hard to choose which ones should be placed in the videos. And after some rough cut viewing sessions and feedback, it kind of dwindled down to certain ones. But a lot of the time in the footage, it's them just figuring it out, whether if they're writing a bunch of numbers on their papers, or it's Xander being very, very stressed out at some point. There's a lot of footage, and it was very difficult to just find the best moments. And it came out to be, I think the clips that we used in that video were some of the best ones. There's a lot of funny moments. There's a lot of stressful moments. And overall, I think they ended up getting the message. They figured it out. It took them a while. And it took me a while to edit 3 hours of footage to 28 minutes, but we all figured it out eventually.
Yeah, and some of the interesting decisions that we had to make were like, how do we condense some of these? Like, we want to show people how long it took to figure some of these things out, but we don't need, like, we really just want the highlight reel. So the fast forward idea was one that we had, but I think there was you only ended up using that once.
Yeah, it happened
twice?
once. Yeah, there was another cut that we had prior to the one that was uploaded, and there was fast forward bits throughout the entire 35-minute, because at that point it was a 35-minute video, and getting rid of those made it condensed the video a lot more to 28, which was good. And the thing was, I added that to add some kind of effect that, oh, they're figuring things out. But as I said before, a lot of the footage is them figuring it out. So there's a point where it just becomes really redundant to see 4 people jitter around really quick to then them figuring out what they did during that time. And actually, while we were doing feedback sessions within those fast forwarding breaks, we'd actually expand them again, figure out what happened, and see if there's anything good that came out of them. And there were about 4 moments that are in the final cut that were actually trapped in that fast forwarding bits. So it was really interesting.
Yeah, that was one of the big challenges. And then I would also say that it was challenging. We had to find a way to show the audience what they were doing, because we lost a lot, I think, from not having the overhead camera. That didn't give us, so we didn't have that opportunity to cut away to what they were actually working on and which section of the message they were working on. And so we had to figure out a way to visually present that information. And we really also did want the audience to be able to follow along. Obviously, if it took us 3 hours to work through it with a lot of hints, we don't expect that you'll be able to solve it in in a 30-minute video, but at least you see which section they're working on. So if you wanted to pause, but or even just follow along. So the visual cues that you came up with, I think, were a good alternative.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to make that. Learning how to do animations like that was really fun. Throughout the video, you'll see different pieces of paper that were just digital files come up as Michael handed them to the table. They'd pop up just so the audience knows what they're being handed, because with that information, it helps you try to solve the message a lot faster than just thinking of it with just using your brain. And yeah, the visual cue that we added on top, the overlay, that was very helpful as well, because there was this habit of the 4 experts talking and then you kind of forget what they were talking about. So I added that little overlay so the audience knows exactly what it is, and the moment they got it right, I put the answers right underneath it. So it was a visual cue that helped out a lot of people.
And then I also wanted to mention real quickly, there were some challenges just based on, this is the first video of this kind that we've ever done, and some ways that we came up with kind of after the fact, that if we do anything like this again, that we would do differently. And one of them is, I think we decided that we would give them the team like a specific amount of time to work on each section, and then at the end we would just move things along, because especially towards the beginning of the video, we really were attached to the idea of them figuring out as much as they could themselves and taking as much time as they needed. And that was a mistake, because they spent an hour on the first 2 lines of the message, and then
the rest were like this.
And the rest of the rest of the message we had to force people to move along
for many reasons.
For a variety of reasons. And so I think that would be different. So what are some of the other things that we decided that we need to do differently?
One thing that we really forgot about was every time they would figure out a portion of the message, we'd be like, "You got it," and then we would just put the thing down.
You're like, "Yep, that's right. Okay, next."
Yeah, that was it. And I think that's fine throughout the video. We could have done a little bit more of a celebration for them, so they have some kind of like, "Okay, that's good. Let's keep going." But at the end, when they figure out the diameter of the Arecibo dish, we kind of just say, yep. And then we moved on to the discussion. So we definitely want to practice giving them somewhat of a reward for getting things right.
Or make a big deal out of it. Like take the time to acknowledge that they've finished a thing. I mean, the video just kind of ran together, because we were I think we just partially because we were in a hurry, and partially because we don't make reality TV. Like in reality TV shows, I mean, they fake, or they play up some of these moments, like when somebody gets kicked off the island, or when something happens, right? They have a ceremony and they have to do this thing, and
next time we're kicking someone off the
we're kicking somebody off the table. But we need events, right? We need to structure it in a way where you're doing a thing and then that thing is over, and then you start a new thing and then that thing is over. And so I think that builds more of a structure and more of a storyline along into the video. And so, Michael, do you have any sort of lessons learned that you wanted to take away?
One of the big lessons is really something we should have known before this, that you guys have all talked about just how long it took to film this. Almost every video I've been a part of at AGV has taken a lot longer to film than we expect going in. And so we should have been, I think, a lot more prepared for that. And then what's interesting is some of the things you're all talking about, we really didn't give them a lot of guidance when we just handed them the message. And thankfully, they started decoding it in the way that we had kind of hoped that they would, by starting at the top and trying to get the numbers and then moving their way down. But they didn't really have to do that. And you can see in the video when they were first handed the message, they say things like, oh, well, that's obviously a figure of a human. And that's why it was difficult to just say, okay, you have a certain amount of time to just solve this one section, because we didn't really tell them which section they were supposed to be working on until a little bit through the video, when they'd already sort of established a pattern of going down. At that point, it was, okay, try and figure out this next section, try and figure out this next one. But we really just got lucky that I think it was Alexander has seen Contact and figured there'd be a primer in there at the top. And so they started working on that first. But that is the big thing. It's just we need a lot more time, and we should not start filming it very late at night, which was our plan.
Do you have any sort of lessons learned or takeaways from this?
I mean, bring more batteries next time is always a good idea. I mean, not too many other things. I think we've kind of all mentioned it. I actually thought it would be interesting to pose a question to our audience. So we got a comment on the video, which is for some reason not showing up, but it was from one of our viewers, and he had suggested that we, like, if we ever did this again, to look at this certain message. I forget what it's called. But I was wondering if, like, anyone who has knowledge of other things like the Voyager discs and, like, other stuff like that, other transmissions or, like, messages we've kind of sent out into the stars, if any of those would be interesting to you guys to do something like this again with.
Yeah.
Comment down below or in the chat. Still have the chat live. If you're still watching live. Yeah, because I thought it was super interesting. And I, like, you know, I wonder if we were ever to do this again, if maybe we could try to do it live. I think that'd be wild.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
But, like,
man,
it would
also...
it would be really interesting, and, like, people could just, like, pop in whenever they want, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we make a highlight reel of it at the end, but, like, it's a lot less editing from our
yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Definitely.
he's been working on it for a while.
Yeah.
But,
no,
like,
that's an interesting idea. And then we could solicit help from other people.
Mm-hmm.
Though we also
Yeah.
don't want to, like, we could have, other people have explained how to decode this message. Like, I mean, Michael and I, when we first had trouble with this, I mean, there are tons of resources online that explain how to read the message and how each of the different pieces are arranged. So we don't want people Googling us and then, you know, Googling things and then just giving us the answer. I mean, we could do that. The idea is to
need a
try
moderator.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I thought it would be cool.
So,
Also, wait, one last question. For viewers, what would you send out into the stars? Like, what would you put in a message?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so curious, because, like, I don't know, like, it was discussed in the video. I don't know why they put in half the things they did. Like, the number of, what is it? Nucleotides. That made no sense. And, like, all of these things. And, like, why they said, would you put it in pictures? Would you put it in, like, some sort of, oh, yeah, we have it right here. My lovely, it took so long to draw that.
Yeah, I know. Now we're going to use it as a prop in every one of our videos.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so what would you put in? So we've determined that there are some things that we probably wouldn't put in again that would be hard to interpret for our own species, much less for a species that's non-human. You know, I would. One of the things we mentioned was consistency, and, like, I really like the top pieces and the idea of using this to understand this, and this. But then from here on down, it just gets weird.
Why'd they switch to pictures? I still don't understand. Somebody asked about the dish, and I think one of our people behind the scenes answered them, but they were asking about why the M in the dish shape with the whole thing, and it's supposed to be a parabola. I still don't get that.
Right, and so you can tell it's a parabola because when signals come in parallel to each other and hit the dish, they are focused to a point in the center.
Oh, okay.
And so that is a feature of a parabola. And so only a parabolic shape does that. So if it was a sphere, they would not come to a focus in the center. So that's showing that there is some kind of, that this is supposed to be a parabola, and that that there are these incoming lines that then are focused to a point. So that's how you know it's a parabola. But the idea that you are supposed to use this number down here, which is turned on its side and not vertical like these,
because why would it
and then multiply that times the wavelength of the message. I mean, again, maybe somebody would figure this out, because it's the only thing that you have. But it seems like chaos. Like so much of this is just chaos. And again, I understand why we want to include these things, but it's important to think about the recipients on the other end. I also think this was probably done quickly because they were going to send out this message and they needed to figure a thing out, and they wanted something that could be printed in newspapers and that people would see, and it was a picture so they could make sense of it. If it was just glyphs and numbers, that's not very personable. Mm-hmm. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us. We went on and on today. We are like 20 minutes over. So if you stuck with us for the whole time, we really appreciate it. And if you have additional comments or questions, or you see this after the fact, we monitor our channel and we will always get back to you and reply to comments or questions or suggestions. The one thing we didn't get a chance to talk about was our thumbnail. And so we tried changing. So one question I have is, what did you think of our new thumbnails? One thing I thought of after the fact is they kind of looked similar. I was afraid that maybe somebody saw one thumbnail and then thought that it was the same video and maybe didn't click on the second one because they thought it would be the same video as the first one. And I didn't even think of that until way after that, like today. Mm-hmm. And so there are two different videos if you didn't notice. But we tried to make thumbnails that we thought were clicky and
new little alien friend.
With our new little alien friend that would pull people in and get our engagement, our click-through rates up, and then our engagement times up. Yeah. So again, thank you for joining us. We hope that you have a great rest of the week, and we have a whole series of new videos. We are so excited. We are going to be celebrating the Apollo anniversary. So the Apollo 11 moon landing anniversary. 50th anniversary is coming up on July 20th, and we have 3 Apollo adjacent videos. We are super excited about these. We've got all 3 of them preliminarily cut, and they're really good videos. And I hope that you come back and subscribe to the channel and follow us. Make sure you click the bell and so that you get notifications.
Also follow us. We've got a Twitter. We've got an Instagram, we've got a Facebook page, and we regularly, you never know what YouTube's going to do with, notifications and stuff. But if you follow us on there, we always post when we, release a new video or have a new live session. Also with our live sessions with Chris Impey. So if you want to follow us there, we've got all of our information there, too. And, the first one of our Apollo videos is coming out next Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah,
and then I'm going to be at EduCon and VidCon, so Active Galactic Videos will have a presence there. If you do watch our videos, and we are trying to grow the channel, we'd like to get to 10,000 subscribers at some point because it opens up some other YouTube features. So if you can share our videos with your friends and tell other people about the channel, we would really appreciate it. Again, we're students, and I'm not a student.
Well,
I'm a student of life. I'm not officially a student, but I'm still learning, and we're, again, trying to get better at this whole thing. And we appreciate your help. So, again, thanks for your support, and thanks for joining us today.
Bye.